where do we want to be, right? It's almost like we talked about this wall and we're looking, what's behind that wall? What can't you even imagine is possible, but some part of you knows, oh my God, yes, please. And so we're really defining that and feeling and living and seeing that in ourselves. And then naturally, all of the parts that are saying, either it's not possible, you can't have it, you're not good enough, if you do this, you'll be abandoned, whatever the fear is around this desire, they're gonna come up, and then we get to hold them and work with them. We really want to empower ourselves. We want to empower our most powerful parts, our most mature parts, our most joyful, the one that feel the most gratitude, the one that are the most capable, so that they can run our lives, rather than us being run by the inner critic, they're not good enough, I'm scared to get out, the insecurities.
Yeah.
It's either love or fear. And most of the time we mistake what we think is love. Actually it comes from fear quite a bit, right? And that's something that's really painful to see playing out with ourselves and in relationships when we're mixing up these energies of love and fear.
Welcome to the Enlightened DXB podcast. And this is where we have healing conversations with some of my favorite people and some amazing transformational coaches out there. And it is my pleasure today to have Rike John. It's actually Rika, but we all call her Rike here, who is a relationship and love coach. Rike, welcome.
So much.
It's so exciting, actually, to have Rike here, because not only is she an amazing human being, one of the most compassionate people that I know, but full disclosure, she also happens to be my coach, and she also happens to be one of my best friends. And so it's such an honor to have you here. And I thought a great place for us to start, well, first, shall we breathe in together? Yeah, let's take 3 breaths together. Ready?
Yeah.
And in. Yeah. Just co-regulating right off the bat.
Grounding.
Yeah. We were talking about this. It's so important for breath, sound, and movement for us to be embodied beings. Yeah. And I really, really thank you for always bringing that into all of our coaching sessions.
It's also a great trick as a coach. If you don't know what to do, just take a breath and everything is okay.
Yeah, maybe we'll be breathing a lot today.
Yeah.
I thought we'd start out because there's been such a beautiful sisterhood between us, to talk about the importance of sisterhood, what it means to you, how it's been, how you've witnessed it in your work, and also what it means to you personally.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I think you have been one of the biggest influences in that for me. I've always been around women a lot, but I think since moving to Dubai 4 years ago, and then I met you 2 years ago. Yeah, we've really deepened into that. And I think so much of what we're doing and talking about is around dropping a bit deeper, right? Like going more to the heart, to the vulnerability, not being so much in the story and the day-to-day and the la-la-la, all of this like very dramatic, airy, but kind of coming to a place where we're actually seeing each other. And that's something I've really found in Sisterhood with women. We have a women's circle where we're really getting together and we're all holding each other in who we are, right? Essentially, it's a space where we get to show up as we are and we get to be held as we are. And I think there's so much healing in that, because most of us carrying some form of sisterhood wound, right? Some form of it's not safe. For me, it definitely was this fear of being judged by other women. And always needing to hold a little bit of distance and being a little bit like, yeah, I'm in control. I don't need you. You know, like I can, and I mean, we had so many healing conversations mutually for both of us, right? Where
absolutely
I actually got to melt and I actually got to experience what safety feels like and what depth feels like and love. So it's been really magical.
Yeah, if I can speak into that as well. Yeah, I think the last few years in particular have been a real journey around healing with sisters. And for me, it's so healing to be witnessed by anyone, but particularly I think there's like this added layer of safety with women. To be witnessed in your deepest, pain, your joy. Yeah. So if I can speak into the sisterhood and how healing that's been for me, I think growing up, it won't be just me, but a lot of us can probably relate to having sibling rivalries or just not safe spaces between siblings. We weren't the ones that, actually I won't speak for everyone because for sure I know of people that have amazing siblings that they always went to their siblings for stuff. But at least in my family constellation, when we were younger, we were more competitive than we were supportive. And there was also age differences and all of that stuff that come with that. And I'll caveat all this with saying I have a beautiful relationship with my sister now that I really, really cherish. And actually, I sometimes wonder if the women's circle that we hold, the sisterhood wounding work that I've done, has actually supported in deepening my relationship with my sister. And what I have found most healing is, whether you and I are going on a weekend hike in Ras Al Khaimah with the dog, or if we're actually in a coaching session together, or if we're just in a women's circle and there's something alive, there's something, sensitive where I might break down in, gross tears.
Not gross.
Not
at
gross,
all.
but, we really, really getting into it, and to be held with so much love by you, and to say, is there more? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the sort of relationship we all want to cultivate more, probably within our own families, with our own partners, with our own children. But we don't really live in a society that really creates safe spaces like that or really encourages us to do that. And I'm curious for you, you must see some of what the impact of that is with some of your clients.
Yeah, I see the impact with my clients, but as with myself as well, right? Where looking back now, when I look at my 20s, back then I would say I had amazing friendships with women, right? And they were great for what they were at the time. And yet now, like 12, 10, 15 years later, I'm like, oh wow, I was really holding a lot of myself back. Right? I was really not daring to really be myself, to be as messy, vulnerable, difficult, confident, loving, extravagant, right? Like whatever it is. It's almost like the way I grew up is like there's like an acceptable middle of what you get to be. Don't be lower, don't be higher, right? Like be okay, be normal. And
is that the German nature in
it? Might be the German nature. Might also just be my family, right? Where it's like, let's just be normal, like be happy, be okay. We don't need to be stellar, but let's make sure we're not bad, whatever it is. And so I think a lot of my journey and what I definitely see in my clients is reclaiming all of life, right? And we talked about this quite a bit, how sometimes when we're on this like spiritual growth journey, we might have a tendency to go a lot for the shadows and like go into the depth and the difficulty and the mud and what else am I judging, where else am I afraid, and kind of excavate that, which is amazing and so much fun. And a huge part is also to meet each other in the highs, right, in the celebration, and really shine for each other when we're doing great, or when And actually on the weekend, we had this moment in a circle where I was sharing how good I was doing after 3 people who shared how difficult life is. And I was like, everything is welcome. And I think that's the difference, right? Before, in what a lot of mainstream does is there are certain acceptable forms. And I think what we're moving towards is your authentic expression, whatever it is. So like, bring it. Like, I want to see more of it.
Alive in the moment.
Yeah, because also that's like where the energy is and the juiciness and the aliveness. And, you know, when you're saying like, if you're going through something and I will say, oh, give me more, what else is there? It's also a skill, but I guess it requires a lot of inner work in ourselves to not be afraid of that, right? Because most people will like have their own stuff going on, their own judgments, fears, whatever, right? If you share something, you know, it might trigger stuff inside of them. And so this is why it's so beautiful when we surround ourselves with people who are willing to look at their own stuff, willing to kind of release that and be like, all right. Because some people might judge the spiritual journey as egotistical, right? Oh, it's all about me. I want to be a better person. But ultimately, to me, it's like, how can I be more clear, more authentic, more loving, so that I can show up in the world in a different way?
In your most authentic frequency.
In my most authentic frequency. And then it's also the least draining, right? And I see this with quite a lot of my clients when we're working with, let's say, the protection mechanisms that we have that are holding us back from being ourselves. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to manage. It's exhausting to try and to be and, you know, to do all the things. And the more we can just be ourselves, the more energy we have for other things. Right? We don't need to spend as much energy on trying to be perceived in a certain way or trying not to make a mistake, but we actually get to do something in life rather than just managing ourselves, which excites me a lot.
Yeah. I want to touch on, you know, we spoke about this in another podcast, but this thing around, you know, a lot of people, when they start doing the work, we really focus, and I can speak for myself. I know I focus on like, what's that? And let me try and heal that. And let me try and make it better, optimize, you know, it's kind of almost like the same with biohacking or anything else. It's like, how do I ace this? And it's interesting watching me bring that energy to the spiritual work where I'm like, if it's not hard and if it's not, you know, shadow work, if it's not, you know, some of those scary things that we have to do, then it's probably not worth it. And yet, as time has gone on, I have realized that, yes, you do have to look at the dark side, you have to look at the shadows, but what is it all for? It's actually to build the strength so that we can feel ultimate joy, to feel it at its extent. And so light, dark, shadow work. Let's get a little bit more into this. This is a passion topic of both of ours. Yeah,
very much. And just one thing I want to say to what you said, you know, this quote, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so...
Is it true for you?
It's very true, and it's like I'm seeing these different subtleties and nuances with myself and with my clients, and for you, if I may say, so as you just alluded to yourself, like there is this really strong warrior perfectionist of I'm going to do it excellent and I'm going to work really hard, and so of course this is what you bring to the inner work as well. Right? There might be clients who are like, I'm really afraid of the world, and then they might be really afraid of their inner world. Right? I have one client like there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of you're bad, you're like shit, like it's really hard, a lot of inner critic that's really loud. And so if that's how this person goes through the world, then of course they also bring that into the inner work, world work. And so as we're working with, you know, anything, it's affecting all of the other ways that we're showing up, right? When we're kind of head on tackling, let's say, the perfectionist or the inner critic, it then changes how we show up at work. It changes how we show up with ourselves, you know, with our community, with whatever. And I think, and I'm guessing most people who listen to this are at a place where they're like, I want to, I want to do some work.
Or they're curious.
Or they're curious. And the reason that I love this shadow work so much, or the looking at what's not right, so to say, right? Looking at where do I feel shame, guilt, fear? Where do I feel obligation? Where do I feel expectations? Where am I holding myself back? Repression, right? Everything I cannot own in myself. It's because ultimately that's a restriction in how alive and how full of joy and how much we can feel.
Yeah, they're little speed bumps or little barriers.
They're speed bumps, but sometimes they're literal walls, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I have a lot of clients who literally feel like another version of living is not possible. Right? So I work a lot with relationships. Like I have people, both men and women, who think that, a really, truly loving, safe relationship just doesn't exist. It's not possible. And so we have this big wall over there to this world that we kind of wish was there, but all these beliefs, all these experiences, fears, whether that's from, childhood, whether that's legacy, ancestral, societal, whatever, there's these big blocks. And so once we kind of start to meet that with love and, bit by bit, start to dismantle these walls with the most kindness and the least judgment that we can bring, we get to open into things we otherwise didn't even consider to be possible.
I love this. So for those of you who don't know what shadow work, and you're like, what are they talking about? I'll take a first crack at it, and maybe you can add to it. The best way it's been described to me is whenever you look outward and you feel a contraction, a reaction, like, oh my gosh, what is she wearing? Or I can't believe they just said that, or whatever it is, or even within yourself. But usually it's something that you see in other people and you have a judgment of. Normally, if you have a judgment, it's a judgment that you have also within yourself that you're using against yourself. And this is what is causing that contraction. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
To make it even more broad, it's almost like the shadow is everything that we're not aware of, that's not seen.
There's also that Rumi quote that says something like the darkness is from where the light comes through.
And then there's Leonard Cohen, right? It's like the crack in the wall where the light gets in.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I think the quote goes along the lines of something like, as long as you're not acknowledging the darkness, it's going to rule your life, right? And you call it destiny. And that's the thing, like we all have these things that are unacknowledged, that are somehow working in our subconscious or in our unconscious, and that we're kind of seeing in the world. And often it's like energy that's leaking. We're not quite sure, okay, why is this happening? And it can, really keep us stuck in a lot of frustration, fear, tension, right? It can create that judgment. So as you said, like so often there are parts in ourselves we haven't acknowledged or that we're really craving for, right? So it's, if I might judge someone for being very expressive, very loud, maybe I don't allow myself to be very loud. And so how are they allowed to do that? Right? Like that's not okay, right?
So when people come to you, and I'm curious, how many people are actually coming to you and they're already doing shadow work? I'm just trying to get a feel for at least your contingent, or they've heard of it and they want to do it.
Yeah. Actually, with my current clients, maybe half, but not a huge amount of people. Like more people are coming at us saying, I'm not happy. I'm not kind to myself. I'm attracting relationships that really aren't good for me. What's going on? I know it has to do with me, but I don't know what to do. What can I do?
And so how do you walk through them? Do you actually say, hey, this is shadow work? Or do you just walk them through this process and it is what it is?
It is what it is, yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll say it, and also the methodology. So we can talk about internal family systems, which is in our parts work, one of the main methods I use.
Which I love.
Which
I adore.
Probably going to talk about quite a bit also in the future.
Yeah.
So what I really like from how I learned to be a coach with Leila Martin, who's an incredible teacher, Tantra teacher, empowerment teacher. She's just like, go check her out.
Yeah.
We do desire-based coaching, meaning we're not falling into the trap on looking at everything that's wrong with us primarily, but we're actually looking of where do we want to get to? Where do we want to be? Right? It's almost like we talked about this wall and we're looking, what's behind that wall? What can't you even imagine is possible, but some part of you knows, oh my God, yes, please. And so we're really defining that and feeling and living and seeing that in ourselves. And then naturally, all of the parts that are saying, either it's not possible, you can't have it, you're not good enough, if you do this, you'll be abandoned, whatever the fear is around this desire, they're gonna come up and then we get to hold them and work with them. So I think it's subtle, but it's an important nuance to not come in. And most people come in with, oh, I have these things, right? I have these things about myself. I have this inner critic, or I'm love dependent, or I can't set boundaries. And we're looking at everything that's wrong with us. And I think it's really important to celebrate the good and look for where we actually want to go.
Set the pin on the map.
Exactly, because we're going to look at everything that's difficult anyway, right? But we need to counterbalance it. And this is also a lot of the work that we do. We really want to empower ourselves. We want to empower our most powerful parts, our most mature parts, our most joyful, the one that feel the most gratitude, the one that are the most capable, so that they can run our lives, rather than us being run by the inner critic, the not good enough, I'm scared to get out, the insecurities.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I do want to dive into the IFS, or the internal family systems too, because it's such it's just such powerful work, and it's something I certainly resonate with, and I know you do as well. Before we get into it, can you tell everyone, what is IFS?
IFS is Internal Family Systems. It is a method of doing inner work that comes from psychology, it was developed by Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz, who's a family therapist. And he pretty much realized that, honestly, okay, I'm going to caveat this because a lot of spiritual traditions actually have very similar ways of working with this, right? So Richard Schwartz is credited as like the founder of Parts Work.
From Western science.
From Western side, and he's incredible, really important body of work. And yet, because it is a truth about the human psyche, so obviously many different approaches have kind of tapped into that. But the core idea is that we are not just one being, right? Me, Rike, Erika, this one person, but there's like multiplicity. We are many parts. And many people will be familiar with, like, say, the inner critic, the inner child, the inner mother, right? These are almost like the parts that we have, that have landed in mainstream, more or less. And what we're doing in IFS is, first of all, acknowledging that these parts exist and that they are running our lives. And different parts will run our lives in different moments in time. And many of them, I was going to say most of them, many to most of them are acting out of fear, right? They are protector parts that are trying to protect us from something. Even the ones that are angry, they're usually trying to protect us against injustice being done to us or being hurt or whatever. So we're running through the world protecting ourselves. What are we protecting? We're protecting our inner children. We're protecting young parts of us that have been hurt, mostly in childhood, or there's also legacy hurt that comes from our family, our society. And our system is working really hard to never feel this pain again. Right? And I can give a personal example for myself. One of the biggest things that I've worked with when I started this work is my dad and my relationship with my father, who is a wonderful, kind man, but who was very absent and not really there in my life. And I've tried so hard to make him love me and to feel like I have his love. And so I adapted. I became really fun, really kind. I got interested in all his things. And actually had this insight only the other day because a client brought something, and we're always seeing ourselves reflected in clients. What I realized is I put him on a pedestal as a kid, and I forgave everything that he did. He was constantly late, and I was just like, doesn't matter, my dad is the greatest. And one of the reasons I did that is in my imagination, if I would have been angry at him, the chances of him loving me would have been even less. Right? So I better forgive everything, and I'm better like going along with whatever is, so I can maybe get a bit of his attention. Obviously, this spilled out into my relationships with men quite a lot. A lot has changed though since then. So here I was, right? Having this wound of not feeling loved enough by this male figure, and then really trying everything that my little childhood self could come up with to try to get the love. Problem is that these protective mechanisms develop in childhood. Let's say I was, 5, 7, 10. But then I'm 20, 30, and I'm still running the same pattern because we don't update them, right? And so ultimately what we have is a bunch of adults walking around being run by protective parts that have their education and knowledge from when we were children.
It's like downloading an app at 7 years old and never
exactly
subscribing to the update.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, they do update, but you're still having this old app, right? I'm still having the app of like, I need to protect myself and I need to perform in order to get love. And if I'm not being the most forgiving, sweetest, kind, and like generous person, love is going to be taken away. And so this is it's almost like the operating system. But thankfully, that's not all there is. Because the way that IFS understands is we have these protective parts. Underneath, we have these inner children, which we're calling exiles, because they're usually exiled away because they're in so much pain. But we also have something called our higher self, or our true self with a capital S. And self is, how to describe it? It's almost like it's our deepest essence, right? I've heard it described as like our access point to soul, which is the closest thing of us, which is our soul knowing. Self is characterized by being loving, compassionate, connected, also creative, courage. It's all these C's, it's like 8 C's. Clear, right? Clarity. And so and it's in the body, when we're in self, there's like an absence of tension. And I know that you felt this, right? There is this openness.
Yeah.
There is really, we can breathe and we can love unconditionally. And so what we're doing in IFS is we're allowing the protectors to be seen, to be understood, to be met with love, so they can calm down and they can actually feel that self is here. And I love this analogy of self is like the sun. It's never gone, but there are a lot of clouds. Right. And so what we're doing is making the clouds pass like to the side.
Yeah.
And one of the key things, which I know you and I worked a lot on, is to not make this with bad clouds go away. You're bad. You shouldn't be there. Right. But they're here for a reason. They're here to protect. But we want to be led by self, by this. It's just the most incredibly loving and capable aspect of us. And also one of the last thing I want to say is the energy that I feel of self is having the most capacity, right? When we are in our parts, they're often thinking very black and white, they're acting from fear. There is less capacity to feel ourselves, to feel other people, right? There is an agenda, something has to happen or else, because there is a fear behind, there's all this tension. Even talking about it, I'm feeling the tension in my body. Whereas in self, it's like, okay.
Everything just falls off of you like rain.
Yeah. And of course, it's not one or the other. Right? We're usually like, if we were just self, we would just be enlightened and just sit here and not do anything, right, in the world. So we need our parts, right? But what is happening is that our parts, with the help of self, can grow up and mature, right? So maybe the parts that are inner critics and have made us work really, really hard and have like put us down, they start to work together with self, right? And they maybe, check in with the body and with the other parts of the system. Like, are we ready to work really hard? Yes? All right, let's go. Let's roll. Let's do it for 2 hours and then step back. So there's more flexibility, there's more movement.
Yeah. I love that about IFS because, well, a couple things that you mentioned. There's so much to go into there. But Lewis Howes talks a lot about doing inner parts work because he always had a photo of himself at different ages. And he was working through with his therapist, like loving himself as a 3-year-old boy, as a 5-year-old boy. And the key, I think, to it is when you are in higher self, it is that place of unconditional love. As you said, it feels so open, it feels so loving that you can look at these parts that you couldn't maybe have capacity to look at before and really just hold them. And in your case, for example, holding that little Rike the way that maybe you wanted your own father to. And I know I've had multiple experiences of that. But another layer for those people that do a lot of parts work, it was a beautiful reminder and a reframe that you had for me the other day, which was, because I noticed I have a lot of, I think we all do, but I have a lot of like critical parts that want to do things the right way, or a part that wants to, heal in the right way or heal faster or whatever. And then there was this other part that I thought was my higher self that came in and was like, calm down, like just give this space. And so it's interesting to hold all of those and just go, yeah, all of these parts want actually what's best for me. They want me to heal. They want me to succeed. They want me to be in my highest self most often. I don't need to, actually, we should never shame them, right? We should never go, hey, we don't need your help right now. But to just hold them with care, acknowledge them, and then realign together. And you said, they're all your team. Mm-hmm. And I found that, I was like, yes, you're right. Every single one is an amazing teammate in my journey, at work, at home, everywhere. And I wanted you to speak more into that, because I have a feeling, especially when we start parts work, but even if we've been doing it for years, there are tendencies to meet different parts where you're like, oh, I don't like how that part is behaving. Mm-hmm. And then that judgment comes, and then it takes time for that love to come and for it to transmute and alchemize. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's where we can almost like miss the mark a little bit sometimes in our inner work, right? Where we're judging ourselves for not doing the work right? Circling back with what we did earlier, but we're believing that we're in self. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like part of the work is becoming really aware of our body and of our inner energies, right? This is where mindfulness comes in, and that's just a muscle to practice, to really notice, is there tension right now, right? Like, am I maybe, even right now, it's like, oh, I'm actually like tensing my stomach a little bit. And my jaw, okay, let it go. And because these parts manifest as tension in the body or as like something. And so whenever we're coming in with a bit of tension, and usually it's also this righteousness or knowing, when we believe that we know what's right. Subtext is whatever's happening is wrong. There's a judgment, right? And there's a little bit, it's these really fine things. And right, in the beginning, it's almost like low-hanging fruits. You have these big judgments of like, and okay, and then you work with them and then you release them and then you think you're in higher self, but you're still judging, right? Or you're still afraid. And one of the key things that I love when we're doing this work is holding as a blanket assumption, everyone always makes sense. And once we can really do that for ourselves and understand that every single part we have makes sense, then we can do that in our relationships and we can stop judging other people and we can actually love people.
Say more into that. Every part of us makes sense, as in they are serving a role. There's a reason why they're there.
The thing is, in their world, they make 100% sense. So imagine you're 6 years old, I don't know. Someone on the playground points with a finger at you and laughs at you, right? You feel shame, you feel embarrassed, you feel like you're not good enough. This is not your example, it's just a very generic. So you develop this protector of, I'm never gonna see them, I'm never gonna let them see me vulnerable, right? Suddenly you're 30 and you're wondering why you can't open your heart in a relationship, right? It's because back then it made sense to protect yourself this way. And when we're coming in with, for fuck's sake, you should open your heart, you want love, so open your heart, go. Yeah. That part of you that back then was like, no, I'm standing up for her. That part will not feel heard. That part will not feel understood or seen. And we know how it is. When we feel really strongly about something and someone comes and says, no, you're wrong, stop that. We go, no, you can't make me. I'm gonna double down. And that's what happens so often when parts become antagonists. And it's happens all the time. It's very common, right? That our inner critic or other parts are antagonizing each other and are fighting against each other. And what happens is both of them dig in. Mm-hmm. And rather than trying to get them to solve it, take a step back, we zoom out, and we notice how do we feel towards them. And once we, and this is one of the key IFS questions, is how do you feel towards that part? Because what it elicits is this moment of detachment of I'm in the part, I'm feeling super righteous. It's important to wait. There is a me that can feel towards this part, and you're understanding, I am not this part. I am the observer, right? Which is very spiritual. You see this in meditation and so on. It's all very aligned. So how do I feel towards this part? And because this is how my brain works, I usually will ask the question, can you understand this part? Do you get it? And when clients say, yeah, I do, then we say, great, let this part know that you get it. And I mean, you're nodding because I know we do this all the time. Yeah. And once that part feels seen and heard, it doesn't have to be as defensive anymore, and the dialogue is possible. But if I'm asking how you're feeling towards this part and you go, I fucking hate this part, it should go away. Right. Or the example we had with you last week is, I feel so sorry for this part. I want to empower it.
Right.
I want to heal it.
Yeah.
And that's such a nuance of I want to change this part. Right. And it comes from the best of intentions, but it's a savior energy that has an agenda, and it's not unconditionally loving.
Right.
And this is where, as we're meeting ourselves, we're learning to be unconditionally loving towards ourselves. To really be I take you as you are. I get you, I see you. And if you never change, I'll still love you. You don't have to change for me to be lovable. You don't have to change to be worthy. You are lovable as you are.
It's such a nuance.
Yes, but once we do that to ourselves, I get goosebumps when I say this because it's at the core of most of relationship problems, right? In our romantic relationships, that we believe love is conditional. And in relationships, I want to say relationships are always conditional, right? There's always a little bit of conditionality in there. Like if someone is an ex-murderer, you probably will not be in a relationship with them anymore, most likely. But when we can hold ourselves in this unconditional warm regard, this unconditional self-love, we're filling our own field with love. And then we can show up from that energy to our partner, to our community, to our families, right? Without having these expectations of them needing to perform. It's like a training ground for how we're showing up with other people.
I love it. I'm curious, do you want to share about your parts? We've spoken a little bit about this, but recently you introduced me to Jack. And you introducing me made me think, oh gosh, I don't really know your parts. And of course you know mine because we do so much work together.
Yeah. So the beauty about parts is that what I see with clients, everyone has a different system. So I have one client in particular who always has the same parts come back and they always show up in the same way. And it's so beautiful because she's very visual, and then you really have so the team you can count on, the team is there. For me, it's a little bit different. It's almost like I don't have necessarily the same, because just to add, IFS happens not in meditation, but inside of your system. And a lot of the times people will have images, right? Have visuals, colors, forms, shapes, people, animals. I was flying through the universe, being in jungles, it's our imagination can make it up.
I wish I had that with all of these therapies. People are like, oh my gosh, I was seeing all these crazy things. And I'm like, I never see anything. But sometimes I do hear things.
Yeah, so people hear things. People sometimes just feel things in the body, right? Some people don't see anything.
Yeah.
I think because I'm so fascinated by it myself, I kind of encourage it in myself to be very visual. But one of the repeating parts that has been coming up is Jack. And Jack is my ultimate, what we call self-like part. So he's a part that believes that he's me. And his mission in life is to make me heal faster. Because he understands IFS. He's seen it work on me. He's seen me kind of thrive and evolve. And so when we're in sessions, especially with my therapist, and I'm noticing this energy coming up of okay, I know what to do. I see, it's almost because it's very logical. There's a cascade of how we can work with these parts, the question to ask. And also in the end, it's always about loving them.
Yeah.
So Jack will come in and say, let's love this part so we can move on, right? Let's love this part so we can heal. Just love it. And even in my voice, you hear, right, there is a there is a harshness.
Which is so not you. Yeah.
It doesn't show up in my coaching sessions, thankfully, because it's so easy for me to love other people. But as we do, we always judge ourselves the most. And it took me a while to really become aware of him. And I very distinctly remember the session when I first worked with him as a part in my therapy, where it literally felt like he was my second skin. Like it felt like he was me. And it took really a lot of like beautiful work from my therapist to help us detach from each other, right? And to help us kind of understand, oh, this is not me. This righteousness and this pushing myself to be healed now comes from a fear of, if I'm not healed, I'm not going to be lovable. If I'm not healed, I'm not going to attract the partner I want. If I'm not healed, I will not belong to this community of amazing people. I will not have the greatest coaching experience, job, business, right? So he comes from fear. And it's as simple as that, right? It's either love or fear. And most of the time we mistake what we think is love. Actually it comes from fear quite a bit, right? And that's something that's really painful to see playing out with ourselves and in relationships when we're mixing up these energies of love and fear. Right? And you said this to me actually the other day. I think quoted Terry Real, right? If it comes from guilt, obligation, or shame.
Shame. Yeah, guilt, obligation, or shame. Yeah. It's an abusive relationship or abuse. You know, it's not something where you're doing it from love.
Exactly. And also, just to normalize and bring compassion, we all do it. We all act from shame and guilt and fear all the time in these small nuances. And the work and the joy is to become more aware of it, right? And I think that's the biggest shift that I see in myself and that I see in my clients is when we stop judging ourselves for that. We're like, oh, I acted from fear right now. Oh, I've been really afraid. Right? Like this morning I woke up and I was like, I really slept badly tonight because something about this podcast was like activating my system. But I don't have to beat myself up about it.
Yeah.
I am not wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. Somehow it makes sense. And I think one of the key things about this making sense is I might not understand it yet, how it makes sense. But if I'm holding myself in the warm regard of somehow it probably makes sense, it has to, otherwise it wouldn't happen. Oh, there's a relaxation. Yeah. So to come back to a question, deck is one of my main parts. And then I have my higher self, which shows up as this inner queen. Which has also, it's a lot of what I've taken from Layla Martin, is she always says, like, be a queen amongst queens, right? Like the queen doesn't mean you're better, you're looking down at other people, but you're an absolute gorgeous queen, obviously, as we
spoken like a queen,
as we all see here. Yes, but this is the world I want to live in, right? I want to hold myself in my own power, in my own sovereignty, in my own deep love and devotion and service, and be surrounded by people who do the same.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. It all comes down to this thing that we all see on Instagram, and we're talking about it right now as well, this thing about self-love. And it's so easy to put it into a small soundbite or a small Insta post and be like, oh yeah, self-love. And a few years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, of course I love myself. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But I do find the more work you do, or at least in my case, the more work I have done, the softer I've gotten and the more aware I have been of, there's a difference between really loving a part or being really hard on a part to perform or to be proud of a part. I think I was very proud of myself, but I don't know if I really loved myself. It was like proud of achievements that I accomplished through fear of failure, actually. That was a big one. And it's still, it's something that I still have to keep my pulse on because it's just something that's, been a mechanism in my life since childhood. And so I want to pivot a little bit and really ask this question around what does that mean really to self-love? Because it seems to solve everything, right? The degree in which you can love yourself is the capacity in which you can love others. There's quotes like that everywhere. And I truly believe that. The more I love myself, I can really unconditionally love another. But before that, the way that I love myself is probably very similar to how I loved others, maybe a little bit more judgmental, really pushing them to perform. And so, I know this is also a passion topic of yours and something very alive for you.
It is. And actually, as you're speaking and as I'm thinking about it, I'm having a little insight because more opens up. So in general, what I'm really feeling is how most of us have trained ourselves to love ourselves in a conditional way.
Right.
If I am good, then I get to love myself, right? If I eat healthy, if I am being kind, if I am successful, whatever, if I look good.
If I get good grades, if I get a good job, if I have
Yes, or if I get validation from the outside, right? If other people appreciate me, if my friends think I'm cool, then I get to love myself, then I get to be kind to myself. But if that's not the case, if I do something wrong, if people judge me, then I don't get to love myself.
And to touch on that, actually, this is why I probably love the shadow work or the dark, going into the depths, which is a little bit more dark and scary, because it is in those moments when, I've screwed up, I've done something terrible, I'm feeling like, oh crap, and I'm feeling not great. Like, this is not a version of myself that I want to love. Mm-hmm. It is in those moments that really tests the mettle of if you have the capacity for self-love. Not when you're on top of the mountain where everyone is praising you and thinking you're amazing. It's when you're at the bottom of the barrel, can you pick yourself up and tell yourself, it's okay and I still love you?
And if, again, I may share, and I know you gave me permission, what came up in your last session is that Self said to this inner child we worked with, when you make a mistake, we need to give you even more love because they need it even more, right? And I think that's such an important distinction. It's not like, oh yeah, fine, you also deserve love because everyone deserves love, right? But it's like, oh my God, babe, you're suffering, let me hold you. Yeah. Let me be there for you. Let me mother you, right? Let me love you. I have, again, goosebumps because I think this is something that is literally changing the planet if we hold ourselves.
If
like
we
this.
can each hold ourselves in that at our worst, we would be such a beautiful human existence we could create.
And I want to also kind of add the thing that just came for me is this, it doesn't mean to be wishy-washy with ourselves and just to be like, oh, everything's fine, just be lovey, right? And that's actually what I have worked with in the last year a little bit. I feel like I have developed so much compassion and self-love for myself. I maybe got a little bit, I started hiding a little bit. I started being lazy a little bit because I'm like, it's totally fine. I love myself. You don't want to work today? Great. I love you. Just like chill, like this. And as if this is the ultimate self-love. But there is something in self-love where we're like, what is really good for us? And checking in with the whole system, right? And it changes in every moment, right? Sometimes self-love is saying, I get that you really want to sit on the couch and we made an agreement. Come on, let's honor ourselves. Let's go to yoga, right? Or let's go to bed early. I mean, honestly, just sign of the time, most of my clients, a lot is about routines, discipline, going to bed, not scrolling, all of these things that we're working with. They're ultimately also a way how to love ourselves. And so when we're starting on this journey, what I'm seeing a lot is that people start to forgive themselves for being bad, having bad behaviors. And we need that as a phase, right? To really be like, oh, it's okay. I don't need to beat myself up. But then what else is there, right? Because, and it's the same when we're doing inner child or trauma work. In the beginning, we need to give empathy and acknowledgement and really hold, right? And really just love on that part of ourselves. And at some point, it's also like, okay, and now let's come from an empowered place, right? That is coming from a deep love, from a deep listening to the team, to everyone else. But often the parts that want to stay on the couch or that want to numb through scrolling are afraid of something. And these are really juicy shadows for me to explore, right? What are they afraid of?
Yeah, what are you avoiding if you're Netflixing?
And I I actually had a part come up the other day where I was I was like, why am I not meditating? I know when I meditate, I am so much better at my job, honestly. And then I had a few weeks where I just didn't want to. And so I sat with myself, I sat with this part, and what this part said is, if you meditate, then you're going to work more, because then you have more capacity to work. That means you're going to play less. I don't like it. I'm going to stop you from meditating so we get to play. Right? Absolute child's logic.
Yeah.
But I was like, thank you for telling me. That makes sense. So there's a need for play. How can we play? Okay.
I love that.
And it's such a small example of how we can meet ourselves with kindness rather than judgment and be like, what do you need?
If you were to just give 3 quick pieces of advice for people that are like, oh yeah, I could use a lot more self-love this week, what are some things you suggest?
Journaling is huge, because for me, the first step is always bringing awareness to what's going on. Before we can meet ourselves with this real love, we need to see what's there. And at least in my field, and I think I attract people who are similar to me, I'm coming a lot from the mind. So I need to have a mental understanding of what's happening before my heart is like, okay. And so journal about what's going on, right? What is the behavior you're observing? What is the corresponding feeling in the body? What is the story you're telling yourself? And maybe what's the belief? And then a great question to ask ourselves is always, what are you afraid would happen if you wouldn't do that? That's how we ask the protector, who are you protecting, right? If you wouldn't do this, if you wouldn't scroll, right? Or if you would not resist meditating, what are you afraid would happen? And that gives us an insight into like, there's a fear here. And so coupled with this is my other piece of advice, is seeing our parts as like sweet, innocent
babies,
right? I sometimes say to my clients, like, imagine this part is like a little kitten under the couch that's really scared and is protecting herself or itself. How would you be? Would you be like, come on, perform, right? No, you'd be like, sweet. Yeah. And my partner and I used to do this because we both were very aware of our parts work, where instead of being like, you don't do this and I'm angry at you, we go like, oh, my baby parts are really angry at this right now. And who can like hate on that? It's my baby parts. It's my sweetness, right? So the way we talk to ourselves is really massive.
I love that.
I mean, these were 2 pieces, but I think they are the most important.
Yeah.
And just again, I just want to say it again, this blanket understanding for ourselves, everything makes sense. And it's our job to figure out why. Why does it make sense that I am eating a whole pie? I don't know. Or, a bag of chips. It makes sense somehow.
Yeah.
Let's meet it with, okay, this is a good thing to end on, because curiosity is one of the key flavors of love. It's the opposite of judgment. It's the opposite of fear. It's actually being like, oh, what's here?
It's an opening.
Right? And I know that both you and I, because we have similar wounding, is if someone meets us with curiosity, we're like, oh, so seen. I feel so important. They want more of me. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So when we can do that to each other, when we can actually meet each other as curious beings rather than judgmental beings, which is a Ted Lasso quote, by the way, which is a great show.
It is a great show.
It makes all the difference.
I love that. Rike, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but we need to end this one here. We'll definitely have you back on the podcast. Tell me, girl, where can people find you to do this IFS work and love and relationship coaching?
Yes. So my Instagram is Love with Rike. You can find me there. You can find me on my website, rikejohn.com.
And we'll put that all in the show notes.
Yes, currently work in Dubai, but also online. Actually, most of my clients are on Zoom, even the ones in Dubai. So we can do this online.
Beautiful. Thank you, darling.
Thank you so much.